Hello everyone, welcome to our channel University of Political Science. Today I discusses about political actualities in Aristotle. The opening paragraphs of Book 4 of the Politics show a significant enlargement of Aristotle's conception of political philosophy. Any science or art ought, he says, to cover the whole of a subject. A gymnastic trainer ought indeed to be able to produce a finished athlete, but he ought also to be able to supervise the physical education of those who cannot become athletes, or select suitable exercises for those who need a special kind of training. The same should be true of the political scientist. He needs to know what would be the best government if there were no impediments to be overcome, in other words, how to construct an ideal state. But he should know also what is best relative to circumstances, and what will succeed in any given conditions, even though it is neither the best abstractly considered nor the best under the circumstances. Finally, on the strength of this knowledge, he should be able to judge what form of government is best suited to most states and attainable without presuming more virtue and intelligence than men commonly possess. With this knowledge he can suggest the measures that will be most likely to correct the defects of existing governments. In other words, the complete art of the statesman must take governments as they are and do the best it can with the means it has. It might even divorce itself from moral considerations altogether, and tell the tyrant how to succeed in tyranny, as Aristotle actually does later. No such radical separation of politics from ethics was intended, but nevertheless the new view of the statesman's art makes it a different subject of investigation from the ethics of individual and personal morality. At the beginning of Book 3 of the Politics, Aristotle had discussed the virtue of a good man and the virtue of a citizen, and had treated their non-identity as a problem. In the closing pages of the Nicomachean Ethics, he takes for granted that they are not identical and presents the problem of legislation as a branch of investigation distinct from the study of the noblest form of ethical ideal. The subject, he says, has been too much neglected, but is necessary to complete a philosophy of human nature. Significantly also he refers to his collection of constitutions as a source for studying the causes which preserve or destroy states, and which bring good or bad government. It can hardly be doubted that the proposed study is that which ended in the writing of Books 4 to 6 of the Politics. When these have been studied we shall perhaps be more likely to see with a comprehensive view which constitution is best, and how each must be ordered, and what laws and customs it must use, if it is to be at its best. This discrimination of ethics and politics, which marks the beginning of the two as distinct, but connected subjects of investigation, is of a piece with the astounding power of logical organization displayed by his philosophy as a whole. By virtue of this capacity, in which he far surpassed Plato, he was able to outline the main branches of scientific knowledge, as they have remained even to modern times. The political and ethical constitutions. The analysis of actual forms of Greek government undertaken in Book 4 is attached to the sixfold classification of constitutions in Book 3. Perhaps more truly it is connected with the treatment of monarchy in the latter part of that book. Aristotle now refers to monarchy and aristocracy as belonging to the class of ideal states, though this does not correspond very accurately with the discussion of them in Book 3, and he proposes to pass on to a closer examination of oligarchy and democracy. It is commonly supposed, he says, that there is only one form of each of these, but this is a fallacy, a remark which recalls his comment on the difficulty of seeing that there are several kinds of monarchy. What the practical statesman needs to know, in order to work with actual government, is how many kinds of oligarchy and democracy there are and what laws are suitable to each kind of constitution. This will enable him to tell what form of government is best for most states, what is best for a state that has to exist under some special condition, what is needed to make any given form of government practicable, and what causes make for stability or instability in different kinds of states. The reopening of the question of classification with respect to oligarchy and democracy requires a re-examination of the general nature of the Constitution. The view which had on the whole prevailed in Book 3 is that the Constitution is an arrangement of citizens, or a mode of life which more or less dictates the external organization of the state. This is a normal point of view so long as the ethical aspect of the state was uppermost in Aristotle's mind. For the determining factor in any state would be the ethical values which the association of citizens was designed to realize, The moral purposes of the citizens in living together would be the essential thing that they had in common and hence, so to speak, the life of the state. Aristotle had, however, defined a constitution also as the arrangement of offices or magistrates, which is closer to a political view of the state in the modern sense. In book for the latter definition is restated and the constitution is distinguished from the law, which is the body of rules to be followed by magistrates in performing the duties of their offices. Aristotle also adds still a third analysis of states into social classes, or united groups smaller than the state itself, such as families, or the rich and poor, or occupational groups, such as farmers, artisans, and merchants. The economic structure of the state is not spoken of as a constitution, but its influence is often decisive in determining what form of political constitution, arrangement of offices, is suitable or feasible. Aristotle compares economic classes to an animal's organs, and says that there are as many kinds of states as there are ways of combining the classes necessary to support a social life. At the outset, therefore, Aristotle has introduced into the discussion of actual states several important distinctions, which to be sure he has not made explicit, but which show clearly how far he has progressed in the assessment of real political forces. In the first place, reference has already been made to the discrimination of politics from ethics. This was involved in the plan of treating the actual apart from the ideal constitution, and is marked by the greater importance given to the definition of the constitution as an arrangement of offices. He now distinguishes also the law from the political structure of the organized government. Still more important is the discrimination of political structure from the social and economic structure which lies behind it. The modern distinction between the state and society, one which no Greek thinker made clearly and adequately, and which perhaps could not be clearly made until the state was conceived as a legal structure, but Aristotle at least reached a very good first approximation to it, the Republic. Moreover, he was able to use the distinction in a highly realistic fashion when he shrewdly remarked that a political constitution is one thing, and the way the constitution actually works is another. A government democratic in form may govern oligarchical, while an oligarchy may govern democratically. Thus a democracy with a prevailingly agricultural population may be quite changed by the addition of a large urban trading class, though the political structure of the state, the offices, and the political rights of its citizens is quite unchanged. The use which Aristotle made of this twofold analysis of the state into political agencies and classes united by similarity of economy's interest would have been easier to follow if he had always distinguished his use of the one from his use of the other, and if he had discriminated both from the interaction of one upon the other. In his numeration of the kinds of democracy and oligarchy, it is often hard to see what principle of classification he is following. In fact, he offers two lists of each without explaining wherein the two differ, though and he seems to be thinking mainly of the political constitution, and in the other of the economic constitution. Moreover, the classification is complicated by the distinction between lawless and law-abiding governments, though this ought not to apply to oligarchy at all, and in any case would have to be regarded as a result derivative from the arrangement of offices or classes. But though the treatment is not schematic, it is substantially clear, and unquestionably it represents a mastery of its subject, the internal working of the Greek city-states, such as has rarely been displayed by any later political scientist over any other form of government. Substantially, the thought is as follows. There are certain political regulations, such for instance as qualifications for voting and eligibility to office, which are characteristic of democracy, and others which are characteristic of oligarchy. There are also economic conditions, such for instance as the way in which wealth is distributed, or the predominance of one or another economic class, which predispose a state toward democracy or oligarchy and determine what kind of political constitution will be most likely to succeed. Both the political and the economic arrangements vary in degree, some tending to a more extreme, and some to a less extreme form of the two types. The possible number of combinations is large, since states may be formed not only from democratic or oligarchic elements, but also from elements of both types, as for instance it would be if the assembly were democratically organized while the judiciary was chosen with some sort of oligarchical qualification. The way a government actually works depends in part on the combination of political factors, in part on the economic factors, and also on the way both sets of factors are combined with each other. Finally, some of the economic factors tend to produce a lawless state, and others a law-abiding state, and the same is true of the political factors. Such a conclusion is hard to state in a formal classification, but it has the merit of recognizing a great mass of political and social complexity. www.politicalscienceview.com. Thanks. See again to new topics.